ZYXWVUTSRQPONMLKJIHGFEDCVA. When I was 2 years old, I was drawing people quite well. Like they really looked like people. My mum never kept any of them, but she said I was very good, like right from as soon as I could hold a pencil. And then when I was 8, that's when I started using oil paints. My dad bought me a set because I'd got through watercolour, poster paint, felt pens. So I've been using oil paints for 30 years. When I was a kid, I just have to tell you this, I used to make board games. Like, I used to make the whole game. So yeah, I mean, I was making stuff in my spare time. You know, I was painting, drawing. But if I wanted to play a game and the game didn't exist, I made it. It's always what I've done. It's always the thing I've been good at. Like when I was at school and there was anything needed doing artistically, it was like, get Sarah in, she'll do it. So if a stage set needed painting or anything like that, I was always the first person to do it.
Did you ever think that it would be a viable career path?
No, not at all. And nobody around me sort of thought it would be either. So when I was at school, I was always encouraged to focus on my academic stuff. Which I was pretty good at. You know, I got good A-level results and I was actually going to go to uni to study psychology. I was on my art foundation course, and then by the end of the foundation course I realised I wanted to do art, and then it was confirmed when the principal of the college came to see me and said, I think you're making a mistake, I think you should be doing art. So I ended up getting my uni place through clearing. But yeah, I mean, all through my childhood, it was kind of thought that you don't do art as a living. It was always going to be my hobby, you know. But my dad, bless him, it's actually his birthday today. It would have been his birthday today. He died in 2004. But he always said, follow your heart, dear, and do what you love. The thing is, as well, it's not as if I just suddenly started selling my work. I'd sold little bits through my teenage years, especially at school. I was always making stuff and selling it at lunchtime. So that's just in me, that entrepreneurial streak. I always felt like I'd earn my own money doing something of my own, but I didn't think I'd be an artist. And I used to say, yeah, I'm going to go into advertising and stuff like that, or I was going to be an architect, like something where you draw but make money. Never thought I'd be an artist and make money. Not that I make a lot of money, it's just that I make enough money to do it. I've often had part-time work, and I've actually got a part-time job at the moment in an art gallery, because that for me is a really healthy balance, to have something where you're actually interacting with other human beings, because being an artist is such a solitary profession. So spending all day, every day on my own in the studio is not really all that healthy for me. So I've only recently got this job in the gallery and I'm really loving it.
What is it that you're tapping into when you are on your own?
Just the innate thing of creating, really. That's there in me, and that luckily this work satisfies. It's so hard to explain what it is, because it's always been there. I've always had to make stuff my whole life. That's just a driving force that's there, and I get ideas and I want to see those ideas to fruition, you know. So some days it's not there so much. Some days it's more of a battle, but when it's flowing and it's really working, it is amazing. It's a great feeling. When I'm painting without really thinking about painting, that's when I do my best work. When I'm painting and it's laboured and I'm having to think really hard, that's when the work isn't quite so good and it looks more laboured and, well, it looks it to me anyway. But it's when it just happens of its own accord, that's when I do my best stuff. It's like meditating, you know, it's like just being in that place without thought. Yeah, I do my best work when I'm alone, definitely. Sometimes I do my worst work while I'm alone as well. I use a really wide range of brushes, from everything to, you know, tiny brush like this one that I'm using here.
Why do you paint the types of things that you do paint?
Well, it began because I kind of discovered macro photography. I was doing close-up portraits of friends and other students on the degree, and they were really colourful, and I was getting increasingly interested in finding like a focal point, so it would be the face would be the focal point, and then having blurred colourful backgrounds behind them. And then when I graduated and I was in my first sort of studio, I was situated right next door to a toy shop, and they had this box of a load of like Kinder toys and little tiny just random toys and objects. And I just got this macro lens for my camera, and so I bought a load of these funny little toys and started photographing them. So that's how it started. And so I switched from faces to objects, the faces of little toys and things, so toy portraits if you like. And then it moved, obviously they're small and colourful, so it didn't take long for me to think of sweets as another subject matter. I'd moved to Reading and I'd got a studio above a pub, because I'd had a studio and a gallery even, which I'd set up above a pub in Leicester when I was still at uni. But I had to move down to Reading because my partner at the time got a job down there. And I was working above this pub, and then we got kicked out, me and my friend, who'd also done my degree with me. We got kicked out, and I had two options. I could either put all my paintings in a skip or walk round to this new gallery in Reading called the Jelly Leg Chicken and take the painting and see if they could exhibit it. So I walked across Reading armed with this big beach scape, and I walked into the gallery, and Suzanne Stallard, who ran it and still runs it today, I said, "Hi, could you please exhibit my painting?" And she actually hung it there and then in the gallery, and it was a beautiful space. It was a purpose-built gallery space, and it was stunning. And she hung it, and in a week it sold for £1,000. And I'd been selling similar beachscapes on my degree for about £150. So suddenly this painting sold for £1,000. And that's when I knew, okay, I can do this for a living. There's potential here. But I did literally, it was a really windy day that I was carrying, it was a big canvas, almost as big as this. And it was really windy, and I nearly lost it.
The fact that it sold so quickly, I mean, did she want to replace? She was like, "Do some more, please." Yeah,
she did, and we did replace it with another beach, and then that sold as well. So yeah, they were inspired. While I was at uni, I did work America, and I went to a place called Ocean City, and I worked on the boardwalk in an old-fashioned photography studio where you dress people up as gangsters and cowboys and take sepia photos. And anyway, the whole summer we were staring out at the sea, looking at this huge beach, and just with all the people dotted along the horizon and with all the little umbrellas and things. And that just embedded itself on my retina, that sight. So when I got back to uni, I made these really big beachscapes of that exact scene. And then they became quite popular to sell once they'd been used for my degree. So Reading was great for me, and the jelly lead chicken was amazing because not only did I work there as a practicing artist and exhibit there, I also worked there part-time, and I did curating there, so I got to hang shows and exhibitions and find new artists. There was a group of us and we were all practicing artists, and it was a really good thing to be part of because you finish your degree and you're sort of out on your own. So then to find the jelly and to find like-minded people, similar age, doing the same thing was brilliant. They took my work to the Affordable Art Fair in London, and I sold my first toy painting for £1,800 actually, and that was another painting. Selling that in London at the art fair was a really big moment for me. And I remember it was of a toy fish, and the fish was in focus and then all the background was blurry. And so many people loved it. I could have sold that painting like 6 times over. And at the time, someone said at the gallery, "Can you do another one?" And I thought, oh no, I can't paint that again. That was really hard. But I did end up doing a whole series of these toy fish, and I became known as the fish girl, which I didn't really like much. But yeah, it was fish, and then it was Pokemon. They were, in my early sort of commercial days, they were the subjects that I was getting known for. But they were great because they had character. So that was how it moved from portraits to, I've never called them toy portraits before, but that's what they were really. So yeah, they were my first sort of big sellers. And every year I did the Affordable Art Fair, and I'd make good, have good sales. So that was kind of like my bread and butter. Well, then I moved into publishing, and I signed with the publishers Washington Green, and that was a difficult transition for me because I'd worked in an independent gallery, and there was a publishers gallery in Reading, and we used to get so cross that people would buy stuff, like buy prints, when they could come to our gallery and buy an original for the same amount of money. So I was in fact moving to what we called the dark side of the art world, and a few of my galleries were shutting. It was a time when it was really tough. The economy was tough, and I was working on this solo exhibition, and my gallery rang me. I was at an outdoor art fair in Brixton called Urban Art, and it was raining, and it was not going well because all my work was outside, like covered up by polythene, but it was raining. It wasn't ideal. And this gallery rang me and they said, "We've got some really bad news. We're going to have to shut the gallery." And I was gutted, and I went home and I just felt so dejected, I thought, this isn't going well. What am I going to do? And I looked up about publishing because a friend of mine who I'd known from Reading had gone into publishing, and he seemed to be doing really well. And I looked it up online, and I thought, well, let's give it a go. So I wrote them a letter, and yeah, they signed me. And then I was suddenly in a completely different sort of art world, where all my originals were bought now by the publishers, and then they would sell them through their galleries, but they would also make limited edition prints of all my work. So suddenly my work was out across the UK and getting seen by lots more people, and it was mad. I mean, it led to certain things such as the Metro article in 2008, where lots of people, including you, got introduced to my work. So it was fantastic, and I was doing radio interviews, I even did some telly interviews, because the storyline behind me was that I used to work in Woolworths, and I used to work on the pick and mix when I had a part-time job when I was still at school. And so artists goes from selling pick and mix for pence to selling pick and mix of paintings for thousands. So all of a sudden I became, fairly suddenly well known, in the art world anyway, for doing my work, and that was quite surreal. I mean, I was with them for 7 years, and it was a bit like being on a really intensive MA, because I was, expected to produce a decent amount of work. They encouraged me to go really big, so I was doing really big canvases, and I did some of my best work. But then it got to a point where there was only so far I could go within that, and I had lots of ideas which were less commercial as well, which I'm still hoping. I still haven't got around to painting, but I plan to now over the next couple of years. But and it just reached a point where I wanted to move on. So I left the publishers officially. It was the beginning of 2014. And so I'm independent again. And I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to re-establish myself in galleries around the UK. I've got interest from galleries abroad as well. I just, at the moment, haven't got a body of work because I've been doing commissions for the last couple of years. So I haven't had an opportunity to create work just to put out there. But what I am doing is self-publishing. So I'm just starting to put my own prints out there, which is exciting. Well, my art is so accessible. I mean, it's so accessible. I'm on the syllabus in schools, and I was actually on the GCSE paper last year. So the subheading in the exam piece was food, and it mentioned me as somebody to look at. I was in the same sentence as Cézanne, which is pretty cool. So that's been phenomenal So I get a lot of emails from teachers and students asking questions and saying that they've been inspired by me and doing their own versions of my paintings and stuff like that. Is quite amazing, really.
Roger Federer is also a fan.
Yeah,
Paddy Considine
is
also a fan.
Yeah, I've got some lovely, well-known people. Yeah, which is quite amazing. It's quite surreal, really, more than anything. It's so funny because the gallery that sold the work to Roger Federer, they didn't tell me, or they thought they'd told me, but they hadn't. And they rang me up one year and they said, "Just thought you'd like to know, Roger Federer's bought some more work." And I was like, "What do you mean more work? What do you mean?" They said, "Well, he bought a couple last year." And I was like, "What?" I didn't know that, and I was really excited. So I think he's got 3 pieces, limited edition prints, but I think he's got 3 of them.
Wow! Do you know which
I'd like him to have an original. They're sweets. I'm pretty sure they're all sweets. Yeah, lollipops. I guess my work has really reached quite a wide audience over the last 16 years, and I'd like it to go further, and the more people that see my work, the better. It's just that's really why I'm doing it, to share it with everyone, and to keep painting, because painting, obviously with the digital world now, there is so many more ways that people can make art and create art, and you can do a painting on your iPad, but I'm still so passionate about just painting with actual paint, and if I can encourage kids to do that and stay, keep it real, as it were, then that's brilliant. I mean, I recently helped out hanging work on my foundation course that I went on 20 years ago, and I noticed there was very little painting. There was maybe 1-2 students that were painting. The rest of it was all digital art or perhaps more sculptural stuff, which again is brilliant. But it just because when I did my foundation course, everyone was painting, So it is a different landscape out there for students of art. I'm all for, new ways and new ideas, but I just want painting to survive. So if I can go some way in helping that, then I'll be happy. what did you call it, a film?
Yeah, a short documentary.
Short documentary about me and my work. So he thought it'd be a good idea to come here today and get the whole art class vibe thing. Because I have had some health issues over the last 11 years because I've got bipolar disorder. I've actually got bipolar type 2. So that means that I have periods where I'm very, very low. Not even just low, actually. There's more to it than that. I can't function. I don't sleep very well at all. And, my coordination goes. So I definitely can't paint. So that's been an ongoing thing in my life now. So, like I say, in 2005 was when I had my first breakdown. And I'd say it hasn't helped my career. It certainly hasn't helped my career having vast periods where I'm not able to work, because sometimes I'm as poorly for 4 months and I'm not able to work in all that time. So that can have a really negative impact, and several times I've thought, right, I can't do this. I can't keep this career going as well as having this illness. But actually, I've got the sort of career that I can pick up the pieces and keep going. And if I'm quiet for a few months, people just think I'm busy painting. My psychiatrist would say I have moderate high periods where I get very creative and I can do the work that I do. I don't think that's a direct result of the illness. I think that is just me and my personality. And I also think that it's really important with mental health to know that every person's experience of a mental health disorder, so even though I've got the label of bipolar, the actual disorder is quite unique for me because it's as unique as your personality. So, I don't like to be defined by it. I don't think that it should be the thing that people know me for or as. It's just a part of me, but it certainly has had a big impact. And as I say, not in a brilliant way. I've lost a lot of time to it over the years. But when I'm well, I really make up for it. And I really take opportunities and I really go for it. And I really try to literally make hay while the sun shines, So it always starts with a photograph, like that. So I print this off and then I grid up the photo, just the edges usually. I don't grid across the picture, I just normally do the edges. And then I do the edges on the canvas and then I just scale up by eye, so in yellow paint. So I start the painting in yellow acrylic, and then once I've got all of it down, I start to use coloured acrylic. So I usually start with oranges and reds and work through the spectrum until the whole thing is an underpainting. So for example, this section through here is a rough underpainting. And then once that's all done and the whole thing is in colour in acrylic, that's when I start the oil painting. And I always start at the top left and work my way across as a rule, getting all the blurry sections, and then make sure the edge of the canvas is all completed. And then I use a really wide variety of brushes. So for example, from the tiny one that I'm using to do this at the moment, right through to brushes like these bad boys, which I use for blending. So for example, this bottom section here, I would put the paint on quite thickly and then blend and sweep the canvas like this, but cleaning the brush off between every stroke. People are quite surprised when they see these being used, but these are like my, one of my main tools. So yeah, so I'm in the middle of this canvas. I mean, I started this last year, but I've not been able to work on it completely. I've been doing other pieces in between, but it's taken several months so far. And it's going to take a few more because this is really very detailed, all this section. So You know, people don't, if somebody, I don't know, has diabetes, people don't say, what's the trigger? What do you think triggered it this time? It's really kind of frustrating, that element of it, because like for instance, recently I was very poorly and there wasn't really a trigger. You know, I had no more stress than I normally have in my day-to-day life, and I just felt poorly, you know, and then I just got better, and there was no obvious trigger for the recovery either. My dad had bipolar disorder, he had type 1, so there's an obvious family link there, heritage, and something I've inherited. But I also think that it's something that I can, with the right help and support and thinking, not let it beat me, and I think I can overcome it. I think it's always something I've got to watch for, but I definitely think there's ways that you can manage your mental health, and I'd like to, you know, think that I can manage it well from this point on, because I've learned a lot of things such as mindfulness. I'm currently finding really helpful stuff with a train of thought called the 3 Principles, which is all about letting go of thought. And I'm also really interested in, well, I do exercise, you know, I do all the things, I eat well. So I think there's lots of ways that you can manage your mental health, that everyone can manage their mental health, not just people with a diagnosed disorder. I think it's really important that kids are encouraged to think about their mental health in schools as much as we're encouraged to think about our physical health. You know, and I think for years that's been overlooked, but I do think that now, I know that a lot of schools are introducing mindfulness for kids, because there's a big epidemic of mental ill health in teenagers, and it's serious, you know, kids are losing their lives to it, and so I think that needs to change. And I think one of the reasons I'm happy to talk about it in this documentary is that the only way things are going to change is if people are open and honest and talk about it. So it's not a stigma anymore, and it's not something that you shy away from and don't tell anyone, because that just makes it a whole lot worse. I often don't replicate completely accurately. Like, I like to exaggerate, so I make colours a lot brighter than they are in the photograph. Because I don't want it to be a slavish copy of the photograph. Okay. I want it to be its own thing. So I don't really like to completely, you know, replicate like really clinically every colour and everything. I want to be able to paint quite freely when I'm actually painting.
Yeah.
Like, for example, at the moment I'm not looking at the photograph.
How important are the people around you that support you?
Oh, hugely. So my husband Ben, he's incredible. He's just my rock, really, and my friends are amazing. My family, all very supportive. So I'm hugely lucky in that respect. I know other people aren't quite so lucky, and yeah, some people can be doing it on their own, and that's tough, and I don't know how people manage when they haven't got anyone. And also mental illness can lead people to have no one. You know, you can end up being alone as a result of the illness. So I'm very lucky, very lucky. That's what we want to say. What chewy? Yoga. Well, I'd like to stay put for a bit in this studio because it's by far the best studio I've ever had. The light is amazing, it's really spacious. I'm so grateful to Freya Purdue, who was the artist here before me, who moved to the Isle of Wight and got in touch with me and said, Sarah, I think you should take on my studio. So thank you, Freya. My work, I want to do more Wilderness of Kitsch. I've only so far been able to do 3 paintings. Now, my Wilderness of Kitsch is where I put real people into my world of sweets and toys. And I can't take credit for the name. My good friend Michael McManus, who's a writer, came up with Wilderness of Kitsch, but it stuck. And so far I've done a painting of the singer Lana Del Rey, and I've put her in amongst Pepsi bottles, American cars, the Hollywood sign. So all the elements around the figure sort of reflect their personality, that's the idea. I've done 2 commissions of 2 little girls, both in sort of woodland scenes, and one's called Alana in Wonderland and one's called Bethan Through the Looking Glass. And I've got a commission to paint 2 little boys in amongst robots and cars and some of their favourite toys. So it's kind of like the ultimate portrait in a way. So it's combining what I started out doing, which was portraiture, with everything I've done over the past 16 years. So that's where I see my work going in the future, doing much. And I'd like to, like huge tableaus. I have got this idea to do one of me, loosely based on The Wizard of Oz, because that's like my favourite film, and one of my biggest influences is that story. So that's like an ambition for the future. Yeah, and actually I've got a tech guy who is going to introduce me to 3D painting, which we haven't got around to doing yet, but it's where you wear virtual goggles or whatever, and you can 3-dimensionally paint. So that's going to be interesting. So who knows what that's going to bring. But I'm going to give it a try anyway.
Could you be doing art in different media?
Well, I am collaborating this year with another artist called Katie, and she is a brilliant sculptor. She is well known for making these huge grenades, but making them look really beautiful. So turning them into painting them to look like a Ming vase, or painting them to look like chocolate. And yeah, she's brilliant. She can turn her hand and make anything look like anything. So what we're going to do, this is exclusive, is we're going to make a giant bag of pick and mix that you can actually walk into, and we're going to make giant sweets. She works in the film industry and she makes props, so she's really clued up on all the different materials that are now available. So she said there's this really cool stuff which we're going to use. I don't know the name of it, but yeah, that's something I'm doing this year. Keep going, that's my other ambition. I mean, Gerhard Richter's in his 80s and he's still doing it, he's still painting. So if I can be in my 80s and still painting, I'll be very happy.